Hello Year 10. This is the next lesson in the booklet. It's about the composition of blood. What we mean by that word composition is basically just what is the blood made up of. Sometimes you will hear people talking about the components of the blood. And again, components mean the parts of the blood. So there are 4 parts, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. So you need your booklet in front of you, and you need to turn to page 19 for me, please. And the objective is to be able to identify the 4 main components or parts of the blood, and also their functions. Functions is a posh word for job, the job of each part of the blood. So we've got a little picture on the right hand side here showing you, a typical view under a microscope of what you might see if you saw what we call a blood smear. A blood smear is when they take a droplet of blood, squeeze it onto a slide, put a cover slip on the top, and the reason it's called a smear is because the blood is smeared across the glass, and you would see a variety of different structures under the microscope. So first of all, the liquid that the blood cells are actually floating in is called plasma. So I'm going to add this label here. You've got this diagram as well on page 19. Now the plasma, as I said, it's a pale yellowy coloured liquid. It's not red. The reason why your blood looks red is because of all the red blood cells, which we'll come to in a minute. And this yellow liquid, its job is to transport other substances, such as carbon dioxide is transported in the plasma, soluble products of digestion from the small intestine. So the soluble products are things like your glucose, your amino acids, your fatty acids and cholesterol, along with things like hormones that travel in the blood, and urea, which is a waste product that is going to be removed from the liver and taken to the kidneys so that you can excrete it in your urine. So the plasma's job is basically a transport medium, something that carries and transports other substances. The next component of the blood are our red blood cells, and you can see them here on the side. Please do not abbreviate red blood cells to RBCs in exams or tests, Example, do want you to see the full name. Now, we already know from our very first unit looking at cells that these cells, red blood cells, are disc-shaped with like a little dimple in the middle. So they're often drawn like this, or as we can see in the diagram, they look like they've got a hole like a donut. The hole doesn't go all the way through. So if you were to cut in half through the red blood cell, what you would see is this kind of shape. So in other words, it's a little bit like a sweet, we used to have refreshers, they were called, or Parma violets, where they were kind of thinner in the middle. So if you put them on your tongue, you will eventually get that middle bit to kind of like dissolve away in the sweets. So this is your shape of your red blood cells, and I'm sure you've seen them on my windows in the lab, or models that people have made when they were back in year 7. So their job is to transport oxygen. And the way they do this is they have a red coloured pigment, and the red coloured pigment is called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a chemical compound that contains iron. That's where the prefix at the beginning of the word heme comes from. And when the oxygen combines with the hemoglobin, it makes something called oxyhemoglobin, And then when the oxygen detaches, it becomes deoxygenated the blood, and that's basically because the oxygen has detached from the hemoglobin molecule, So hemoglobin plays a really important role in helping to pick up and carry the oxygen around the blood. The next component of the blood that we're going to label is the white blood cells. And they're often much easier to spot because they are much bigger than our red blood cells, but there are less of them. They are fewer in number. There are lots and lots of different white blood cells in your blood, and each type of white blood cell plays a particular role in defense in the body. So that is their function. They defend the body against disease. So you may see white blood cells that have First of all, one big like granular nucleus. So it's really, really dotty, the nucleus, okay? Really dense like that. You may see white blood cells that have what we call a lobed nucleus. So instead of the nucleus looking like a circle, it looks like it's got 3 like sections to it, okay? And as I said, each white blood cell has a particular role to play in the body. So you need to know for GCSE that there are 3 roles the white blood cells play in defence in the body. And we teach you this at Key Stage 3 as well, so hopefully this should be familiar. This is retrieval practice. The first one is that our white blood cells make something called antibodies. Now, that word, if we split it up, anti means against, and body does not mean, okay, as in your body. The body part in this particular case means a foreign body, okay? And a foreign body is anything that enters your body that shouldn't be there. Pollen, dust, microbes like bacteria, viruses like COVID, okay? And we'd like to think that our white blood cells would make these antibodies that are against the foreign body. They attach to it, and they attach to something on the surface of the foreign body called the antigen. In year 11, we go into this in a bit more detail. Antigens are just pieces of protein that are on the surface of any particle. And so when that particle enters your body recognizes that that antigen, that protein, isn't normally in your body. So it's foreign. So it will then start the process of the immune system kind of firing up, and the white blood cells starting to defend your body against this foreign protein, this antigen. And so they destroy it, okay? The antibodies will attach to the antigen and break it down and destroy it. The other thing white blood cells do is they make antitoxins. So if we take that word antitoxin, we know the anti bit means against. So what's a toxin? Well, a toxin is another word for poison, something that's harmful to you. Some pathogens, a pathogen is a microbe that causes disease. So some bacteria make poisons and toxins, and that's what gives you the symptoms like making you throw up, making you sick, giving you diarrhea, giving you a rash, and all those kinds of symptoms that we associate with being unwell. So an antitoxin is something that's going to neutralize those poisons or toxins that are made by the bacteria or the pathogen that's infected you. The final way that white blood cells defend your body is they ingest foreign bodies, okay? Now, some people would say that this word means eats. Be very careful when in an exam you write this. Try to avoid using the word eats, use this word ingest instead, okay? And the actual key technical term for what these white blood cells do when they kind of swallow up, so if I show you, here's our white blood cell, here's our pathogen, and our white blood cell literally surrounds it and then will swallow it up, okay, and destroy it with enzymes normally. The key technical term, if you can use this one, if you can remember it, is phagocytosis. A lot of science words are based on Latin words. And so again, this prefix phago is the Latin word for eat. And cytosis means to kind of break down. So it's eating and breaking down, digesting, okay, that foreign body, whatever it is that's passed into you. Whether that's pollen, if you're a hay fever sufferer, okay, triggering off your white blood cell increase, okay, and then that's in hay fever season causes your eyes to stream and your nose to run and all the horrible symptoms that we have with having hay fever, or whether it's ingesting a particle that shouldn't be there, such as dust, okay, or bacteria or anything like that. Now, for some reason on your booklets and also on this sheet, okay, and I think it's because the diagram's actually gone over the top, they have missed out the 4th point. So I want you to write this on the page. This last structure or component, they are called the platelets, okay, and platelets are fragments of cells. So we're going to write platelets and we'll say they're fragments of cells that help blood to clot. So when you cut yourself, the fragments of cells, these platelets, go to that site of the cut and they cause the blood to thicken and to clot, okay, so that you create the scab, so no more blood can escape. So make sure you've labelled these 4 components on your diagram and that you could identify them if you were given pictures of them in an exam, okay. Make sure that you know the functions of the 4 components. The plasma is the transport medium to carry substances like carbon dioxide, hormones, and I forgot to mention a big one, okay, the heat. The plasma actually carries the heat energy around the body, so it keeps you warm. Red blood cells, their job to transport oxygen. White blood cells, the general kind of like function is to defend the body, and we can split that up into the 3 different ways that they do it, the 3 bullet points you can see on page 19. So turn to page 20 then, and it says, who needs blood then? Well, we all do. Without blood, our bodies would stop working, and blood is our body's liquid messenger. If you like, it's a little bit like some kind of transport network, like a train system. It's going to, whereas a train will pick up passengers at one station and drop them off at another, your blood picks up certain substances at some organs in your body and drops them off at others, okay? Even though you cannot see it, blood is everywhere in your body, not just in your veins and your arteries and your capillaries. Sometimes the blood cells do actually creep out of those blood vessels and actually travel between the tissues and the cells. Your blood tastes salty like tears because it does contain some salts in it. The blood's job is to carry oxygen and nutrients to all parts of your body for respiration, to release that energy, and to carry carbon dioxide and other waste products back to the lungs, kidneys and liver to get rid of them. It fights against infection and helps to heal wounds so we can stay healthy. There is no, so far, artificial substitute for all of the components of our blood. They have actually been able to make substitute or artificial blood that will carry out one function. So they've been able to make artificial blood that will carry oxygen. They've been able to make artificial blood that will help with blood clotting, okay, and that will carry different substances, but they've been unable so far to make artificial blood that carries out all of the functions at the same time that our blood currently does, okay? And obviously when people go through surgery or if they've been involved in an accident, occasionally they may need what we call a blood transfusion, okay? A blood transfusion is when you receive blood that's been donated. You can only receive blood from certain types of people with certain blood groups, okay? You can't just have blood from anybody, okay? And so that makes it difficult to make sure at any one time in the UK and in other countries that we have enough stocks of blood, okay, to be able to provide transfusions for people when they need it. So this website here, I have checked it out, it's now defunct, okay? You can't find this website, okay? And I would normally direct you to this website to have a go at answering some of these questions. However, some of them you may be able to answer, okay? And if you don't know them, I'm going to go over them with you in a second. So I just want you to take a moment to read those questions, see if you can come up with some answers or potential answers, bit of problem solving, and then I will go over some of these answers with you. So pause the video now. So question 1, where are blood cells made? Okay, well, your red blood cells are made in what we call your bone marrow. So you might have heard of bone marrow. It's the softer material inside the big bones in your body. So the big thigh bone, okay, the femur. Particularly the femur and the bone that we call the breastbone, the one in the middle of your chest where the ribs come round and kind of connect to that bone, that's called the sternum. So the femur and the sternum is where we would get our red blood cells made. Our white blood cells, and I am abbreviating here just to fit it all in so you can see it, These are made in the lymph nodes in your body, and you have lymph nodes all around your body. Your most famous ones are kind of in your armpit and in your neck, okay, but also in your groin too. And also white blood cells are made in the spleen and the thymus gland, okay, so structures that we have in our body that make white blood cells. The name of the parent cell that all blood cells develop from are called stem cells, and in year 11 you will learn a little bit more about stem cells and their significance and their importance. Why does blood sometimes appear to be red and at other times in blue? So if you look in your wrist in particular, you may be able to see the blood vessels through your wrist, okay, looking kind of bluish colour. Well, your blood really isn't blue, okay? It looks blue because the light is being reflected through your skin, okay? But we do say that the oxygenated blood, in other words, blood that has got lots of oxygenated, tends to be a more darker red colour, whereas your deoxygenated blood tends to be a paler red and has a bit of a bluish purple tinge. So it's due to the formation of the hemoglobin actually joining with the oxygen. So what is hemoglobin and what role? So hemoglobin is the pigment, and it attaches to the oxygen excuse me, attaches to the oxygen to give it these different colours, this darker red colour. The brain receives 15 to 20% of the body's blood supply. So why is this so important? Well, all parts of your body need oxygen, but your brain in particular needs the oxygen and glucose delivering to it to carry out respiration. So I'm not writing in full sentences here, but I am expecting you to do this in your book. To carry out respiration, this releases energy. And why do we need the brain to be respiring? Because the brain is often telling all the other parts of the body, okay, what to do, to tell the heart to beat and to control breathing and things like that. So it releases energy for the body, for the brain to give instructions to the other organs. So in particular, keeping the heart beating and the lungs breathing. Okay, turn over the page and turn your page sideways for me, please. And you've got a table that looks like this, okay? Just so that you've got some kind of idea about how much blood and how many blood cells, okay, are kind of made in any one time. Your body makes on average 2 million blood cells a second. Every second, 2 million blood cells. So there are millions and millions of blood cells in your body at any one time. Now, the best way to help you fill in this table is to do Google searches. So you should be able to draw me, for starters, a red blood cell and a white blood cell and bits of cells of platelets, okay? See if you can find out what the scientific name is for the red blood cells, white blood cells and platelets. See if you should be able to tell me now the function job, because you already know that. See if you can find out how many there might be, okay, per cubic millimetre, okay, of blood. And life cycle, where are they made and how long do they live for, okay? For some reason that's missed off at the bottom of your table on page 21. So make sure you put how long do they live for, just like that there. So pause the video, see if you can do a bit of research, and then I'm going to go over the answers to these. So if we start with our red blood cells first, their scientific name is, they are called erythrocytes. Okay, they won't be asking you to use these words in the exam, but I wanted you to do a little bit of a research type style activity. White blood cells are known as leukocytes. So again, if you go on to A level, you will learn these names of these scientific names of these structures. And I've missed out a bit, very important, thrombocytes cytes are platelets, and plasma is just plasma. It doesn't have a particular scientific name, okay? Diagrams, well, your red blood cell, I'm hoping that you've drawn your red blood cell, okay, as a disc, perhaps with a hollow. There's no nucleus, by the way, in a red blood cell. And just for information, their size, they're between 7 to 8 micrometers. We came across this unit back in the first unit, very, very small unit, and that's for their diameter. So that little symbol there with the circle with a cross through means the diameter. A leukocyte or white blood cell, much bigger. It might have, I'm going to draw a lobed nucleus one, but you could draw one that isn't lobed. So it does have a nucleus, white blood cell and cytoplasm. And they are much bigger. You can see they're actually between 10 to 14 micrometers, okay, in diameter. So we'll put that symbol. Platelets are little fragments of cells. Okay, and they are very small. They're between 2 to 4 micrometers. Plasma is a liquid, so if you wanted to, you could take a yellow pen. So let's see if I can swap to a yellow pen. For some reason, it won't allow me to swap to a yellow pen. You could colour in yellow. So function, red blood cells carry oxygen. I've put it as O2. White blood cells defend the body and fight infection. Platelets, they help to clot the blood. And plasma, they transport dissolved substances. Numbers, 4 to 6 million. Keep. 4 to 6 million. Oh, apologies. For some reason, there we are. And now it's moved everything down. So 4 to 6 million per cubic millimeter. So each one of these is per cubic millimeter. For white blood cells, you can see only 4,000 to 11,000. So there's much less per cubic millimeter of blood. For platelets, 150,000 to 300,000 per cubic millimeter. And obviously plasma, there's no parts, okay? So if I just tell you that the plasma is 90% of it is water and only 10% of it is the dissolved substances, okay? So the solutes, we call those. Life cycle. So red blood cells are made in your bone marrow and they live for approximately 4 months. Some will die earlier, some may live a little longer. White blood cells made in your lymph nodes, your spleen and your thymus. And these live anywhere between 1 to 6 months, okay? Depending on the infection that these white blood cells are trying to fight. Platelets are also made in your bone marrow, but these only live for about 10 days. Okay, and obviously plasma is just part of the fluid that it travels in. So check your table, check that it's complete. You can pause the video so that you can fill that in. Okay, the next task we've got are some questions. They start on page 22 and go over to page 23. And then page 24 is to match up these two halves of the sentences. So what I'm going to ask that you do is you pause the video in a second and have a go at answering the questions and matching up the sentences, and then I will go over all of these so that you can check your answers. So pause the video. Okay, 3 main functions blood does for our body. It carries oxygen. It defends the body. defends the body. And it also carries soluble food, substances, or nutrients. Sorry, I keep leaning on the screen, so soluble food substances, okay, like glucose and amino acids and fatty acids and glycerol and other nutrients. It carries hormones, and it carries the heat around the body as well. Your 4 components are your red blood cells, your white blood cells, your platelets, and your plasma. Filling in the blank, look like red disc, no nucleus, similar in size, is your red blood cell. Small granular fragments, no nucleus, vary in size, are your platelets. Large in size with a well-formed nucleus is white blood cell. And straw-coloured fluid is your plasma. Question 4. Where are the red blood cells made? In the bone marrow. So hopefully all of this should be fairly easy to fill in. Hemoglobin gives red blood cells the ability to carry oxygen. The organ that removes the red blood cells, we didn't talk about this, but it is actually the spleen, the same organ that actually is responsible for making some white blood cells. So the spleen will get rid of them. The red blood cell's job is it picks up oxygen at the lungs and transports it around the body. There's around about 1 white blood cell to every about 600 to 700 red blood cells. So if we're looking at ratios, okay, about 1 to 600, 1 to 700, okay, in terms of ratios. What does a white blood cell do? It defends the body. True or false that white blood cells only travel in the bloodstream and never travel into the body tissues? That's false, okay. As I explained earlier, white blood cells do move out of the blood vessels every now and then to go and fight infection elsewhere. And this is really kind of A-level kind of level. But you might have Googled this to find out some names. There are actually many, many different types of white blood cells, so I'm just going to talk about a few. Neutrophils, they will target bacteria and fungi. That's their kind of like specialist microorganism that they will attack. You've got this really horrible one to spell, eosinophil. I think I've spelt it right. Eosinophil. Okay, they're responsible for creating your allergic reactions. So if mum's changed the washing powder, or if you've been stung by a bee, or you're allergic to a dog or cat hair, okay, it'll be these white blood cells that start the allergic reactions. You've got another type of white blood cell called a basophil, and their role is to help with inflammation. So whenever you've got a swollen bit on your body and you've got what we call inflammation, puffiness, the basophils will go to that area and they start, if you like, digesting and breaking up, okay, all of the stuff that's causing the inflammation. And it's normally dead cells, dead microbes in particular. And then this one you will come across a little bit more at year 11. The lymphocytes are famous for making the antibodies. So when everybody has had their COVID vaccinations, it's these fellas, the lymphocytes, that are going to be making the antibodies for us and helping hopefully to protect us against further infections with COVID. And then the famous one, phagocyte. We've already talked about the process phagocytosis. A phagocyte, its job is to ingest, okay, foreign particles. Okay, so turn over the page for me, please, to page 23. Our last few questions here before we match up the statements. Platelets are removed in the spleen and also in the liver, okay? The spleen is quite near the liver. What do platelets do and how do they do it? Okay, they clot the blood by sticking it together. Basically, they create like a little network of fibres, and that's what causes the clot. Plasma is composed of, we've already told you, 90% water and 10%, okay, of solutes. Apologies. 10% of solutes. True or false? Missing certain proteins does not affect the blood's clotting ability. This is true. And true or false? All 4 parts of the blood work together at the same time. This is also true. Actually, apologies. Question 6 is one of those false negative, does not, should be false. So if you are missing proteins, it does affect the blood's clotting ability. Okay. Link the 2 halves of each sentence together, okay, so they make sense and form a true statement. It's probably easiest if I number these. Apologies. We'll get to the right place in a minute. Okay, if I number these. So if I call these boxes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 statements at the beginning, and we've got to match them with the correct one. So red blood cells are called erythrocytes. So that's our number 1. The main function of the red blood cells is to transport oxygen. That's number 2. In the red blood cells is hemoglobin. Number 3, that should be, this helps the transportation of oxygen to the working muscles. Number 4, white blood cells protect the body by going to the source of infection. So if you've got a cut, white blood cells will often travel to that cut because they anticipate that you might have microbes that have entered into the skin. Number 5, white blood cells are also called leukocytes. Number 6, white blood cells are produced in both the long bones, what we call your femur, and the lymph tissue of the body, as well as in your sternum. We could add to that. The platelets' job, number 7, is to clot the blood. Platelets are smaller parts of larger cells. Number 8, plasma is 90% water and makes up 55% volume of the blood. And lastly, number 10, plasma contains plasma proteins that help circulation between cells and tissues. Number 10. So, can you give yourself a score out of 10? How many you honestly got just by yourself to see how well you did? And the very last lesson that we will have next lesson will be just reviewing, recapping what we've learned and looking at some past paper questions. Thank you, Year 10.